Right. Welcome, everyone. So glad to have you joining us here today. We have another about 30 seconds before we get started. Give people time to enter. Welcome, everyone. Just giving a few more seconds before we go ahead and get started. We are waiting for more attendees to join. All right. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Well, welcome. Thank you all for being here today to join us at the California Water Data Consortium's Data for Lunch State Agency panel discussion on the role of open data for long-term water resilience in California. We're thrilled to have you joining us here today for what promises to be a fantastic event and discussion. I'm Tara Moran. I'm CEO of the California Water Data Consortium. And for those who may not be familiar with the consortium, we're an independent, nonprofit organization created by a partnership of state agencies and others to ensure that we have the best possible data and information about our state's water and ecological resources, so we can make better decisions that will allow California to continue to prosper in the face of unprecedented climate challenges. We do this by bringing people together to exchange ideas, synthesize information, and design new ways to share data. We conduct research, host panels and webinars like this one, and communicate across the field to build a resilient, prosperous future using the best possible data and information. And so for those of you who have attended any of our previous Data for Lunch events, we are really breaking the mold with this event. This is our first ever panel style Data for Lunch event. And we are excited to be starting off with such a bang. We're joined here today by an incredible group of individuals who've all been involved in advancing implementation of the Open and Transparent Water Data Act in a variety of capacities. We're going to have a great discussion here today on the value and opportunities of open water and ecological data and the value that that brings to agencies, departments, as well as the state more broadly. But we're also going to talk about some of the risks associated with open water and ecological data and ways to mitigate those risks. So I want to say a huge, and before I hand things over to Devin Upadhyay, our panel moderator for the session, I want to say a huge thank you to Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, who is sponsoring this event. Financial contributions to support these events help us ensure that we can continue to keep them free and that we continue to be able to make event material and recordings freely available on our website afterward. To that end, a recording of this panel discussion will be available on our website in the coming days. And so I'm going to go ahead and hand things over shortly. We really want the discussion between all of these incredible individuals to be the focus of today. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to our panel moderator, Devin Upadhyay, who is both a founding member of the consortium's board, but is also the executive director and assistant general manager of Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. I am not going to read his bio as I introduce him, nor is he going to do the same for other panelists joining us. But Amanda is going to drop a link that includes their bios into the chat. I would strongly encourage you to read them. This is an incredible group of individuals. And so with that, thank you, Devin, and thank you to all our panelists.
Hey, thank you, Tara, and good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you today. And I would say that this is breaking the mold in the sense that I've also been made aware that we've got more than 300 people that registered for the event today. So I know there's a lot of excitement around this topic. If you're tuning into this discussion, then you know that water is an absolutely critical resource, particularly here in California. It's critical for our ecology, supporting the tremendous biodiversity that we have in this state. 40 million people, one of the largest economies in the world, and the largest agricultural economy in the United States. So it's obviously incredibly important. And yet, you all also know that the last few years, we are seeing in real time the effects of climate change, of swings from year to year that are unlike anything that we've experienced before. And I would say even changes in social values that are affecting the way that we need to make decisions as water managers. And it's tough. This isn't easy stuff. And I would say that the Open and Transparent Water Data Act, back in 2016, even contemplated some of these challenges, and that there was a way for us to get better. And I'm going to paraphrase a little bit from the act itself, but it acknowledged that integrating existing water and ecological data into kind of this authoritative access platform would help us as water managers to make better decisions. And it would also help water users make more informed decisions based on where and when water is available, and how it's kind of allocated. This is not easy stuff. And I would share that from Metropolitan's perspective, one agency, we've been trying to grapple this problem from the perspective of, as an example, the California Public Records Act, where people approach us, institutions approach us and ask for information and for data. And if the answer to that request is that we would be providing data, that we would make it available, is there a way for us to do that beforehand, ahead of time, through a portal where folks would be able to access that information and may not ever need to ask us for it through, say, a PRA? So that is a vision. And for us as an entity, it's been very difficult to accomplish. I can tell you that just in the last week, we had a discussion with our own board about standing up a brand new enterprise content management system that will allow us to better manage data internally, that could help us achieve that vision externally for people. But it's millions of dollars. We'll be following through with that, but we're one agency. And so you can see, if you scale it up, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of human resources, time, and dedication that's required to solve this problem. There are great gains to be made. You put that information out there, and research institutions might be able to access it in a way where they're looking at our operations and suggesting improvements in the future. It can also reduce the staff time that we need to devote to this if we structure it in a way where it's easy for folks to access it very cleanly. But it causes us to have to deal with some kind of challenging questions. How do you deal with personal data or information that there could be a risk of it being put up online in a way that you didn't intend, and it could be misused? I can't think of a better group of folks to help us sort through some of these issues, people in great leadership positions with our state that we're going to be able to engage with and hear from today. Our panel is 3 individuals, starting with Dr. Laurel Larson. Laurel is the Delta lead scientist with the Delta Stewardship Council and in partnership with the U.S. Geological Survey. We also have Carla Nemeth, our very own director of the State Department of Water Resources, and Joaquin Esquivel, our chair of our State Water Resources Control Board. Welcome, everybody, and it's wonderful to have you here as part of this conversation. So why don't we start off just with an initial opportunity for each of you to share a little bit about your perspective on this value associated with the vision of open and transparent water data. Spend a few minutes talking about that from your personal perspective and the agency that you represent. And then if you can also maybe start off, we're about to get into the holiday season, so to make this human, maybe just a nice memory that you have from the past in terms of the way that you celebrate the holidays, and get into your opening comments. So Laurel, we'll start with you. Carla, then we'll go to you, and then Joaquin will go to you. So good morning, Laurel.
Thank you, Devin, and good morning to all of the other panelists. I'm really looking forward to this conversation as well. Just in terms of my holiday memories, Thanksgiving has always been one of my favorite holidays. I love good food, and as a kid, it was the one time of year when our family would travel across the state of Florida from the East Coast to the West Coast to my grandparents' house, which was right on Tampa Bay. And that was the time of year when I would see my cousins who were all around my age. My grandmother would always have a kids' table set up, and she was an artist, and she would make us these birch bark canoes that we would play with while the dinner was going on. But after dinner was really when the fun began, and the cousins and I would all go outside, and I just have wonderful memories of playing flashlight tag while running through all the neighbors' yards right next to the bay long into the night. And it was just such a memory of freedom and fun. So I always really like Thanksgiving. So as Devin said, I am the Delta lead scientist, and I just want to say a few words about the Delta, first of all, and why we're a critical part of this conversation. The Delta truly is at the heart of California's water system. It supplies water to 2/3 of Californians. It irrigates 40% of the fruits and vegetables produced in the US. And it's a major biodiversity hotspot as well. My agency, the Delta Stewardship Council, was created in 2009 through the Delta Reform Act for the purposes of managing the Delta for what's known as the co-equal goals of maintaining a reliable water supply for the state of California while protecting, enhancing, and restoring Delta ecosystems. And part of the mandate is to do this while maintaining the value of the Delta as a place of agricultural, cultural, and historical significance. So the Delta Stewardship Council governs through the Delta Plan. And at the heart of the Delta Plan is that projects that take place in the Delta must be based on best available science. Now, the Delta Science Program, which is part of the council, was created also under the Delta Reform Act. And we are charged with the mission of ensuring the best possible unbiased science. And so, like the California Water Data Consortium, we are a boundary organization. We're tasked with performing science synthesis. We coordinate across many different agencies in order to make sure that the best science is funded and that the results are put together in a way that makes sense and meets the needs of decision makers. And we also perform scientific reviews and develop science strategies for the region. So with that background in mind, open water and ecological data is really critical to our mission. And it's critical for several reasons. One is that associated with the Delta Plan are performance measures. So how well are we achieving these co-equal goals and the many dimensions of those co-equal goals? This is something that we need near real-time data for. And then also, open water data is just absolutely essential to ensure that the scientific information is accessible, that it's useful to the needs of decision makers, that it's equitable, getting into the hands of communities that are going to be impacted by water management decisions and need to know what those impacts are or are likely to be. And then open water data is also needed to ensure the most cost-effective and wide use of investments in monitoring. And one example that I like to highlight is that part of the work of the California Water Data Consortium and implementation of AB 1755 has been to actually advertise these data sources and some of the needs that could be fulfilled through data analysis to the community. There have been annual water data challenges. And as someone who also holds a position at one of California's public universities, at the University of California, Berkeley, I know firsthand that there are a lot of students and a lot of brain power out there. And that brain power is increasingly technically savvy. Students are increasingly learning data science skills that are really at the forefront of the discipline. And they're also really interested in making a difference, in applying those skills to the common good. And activities like the California Water Data Challenge help bring new brain power to some of these most pressing problems, and also create economic opportunities. Some of the projects I've seen proposed at these events have been commercial tools that will allow regions to, say, better detect leaks and better plan water conservation investments. And then the final thing I want to say in my 5 minutes is that the Delta Stewardship Council continues to be an advocate, not just for open water data, but for how we might use that data. And use of that data requires large investment in synthesis and also in modeling that integrates different data sets to address some of the most pressing challenges. And we don't necessarily know what those challenges are going to be, that they often arise after the monitoring programs were set up. One that we're facing right now is, everyone in California recognizes that there's a need to store water, excess water that we receive during the wet season. But how much of that water, how much of those peak flows can we cut off and store without causing severe ecological damage? This is something that we can theoretically address with the data that we've collected, but it requires synthesis and modeling and sophisticated analyses that that integrate these different data sets. The Delta Stewardship Council hopes to play a major role in working with the California Data Consortium moving forward on some of these strategies for synthesis. And there's a long history here. AB 1755 was in large part inspired by an environmental data summit that the Delta Science Program put on in 2014, which recognized that the data sources were growing in number, size, and complexity, yet our ability to manage and analyze that data in service of effective decision-making lagged far behind the demonstrated needs. And that summit was followed up in 2015 by the production of a white paper called Enhancing the Vision for Managing California's Environmental Information. And it was that white paper that was really inspirational to and foundational for the eventual legislation that came around with AB 1755. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Laurel. And those are some great examples of the potential benefits if we can kind of accomplish this vision. So I really appreciate that. Carla, why don't we move to you? Good morning, Carla.
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here and a real honor to be here with Dr. Larson and Chair Esquivel, two really important partners in this endeavor. And I'll start by maybe a holiday memory. So I grew up in San Diego and my parents were both New Yorkers. And so they loved the fact that they escaped the winter from New York. But as a kid, I was always like praying for some cold snap to help my life feel more like the Lifetime movies or the ABC after school specials, to date myself. That really never happened in San Diego. So plan B was just to embrace the fact that we had this gorgeous climate, and we always went to the beach. Thanksgiving weekend, I grew up not far from UC San Diego, and we would go down to the beach and walk around. And I still carry that tradition with me up here in Sacramento. Traditionally, I am a person who celebrates Christmas. And so traditionally on Christmas Eve, I go down to Casumnas and I just stand in awe of the sandhill crane as they're coming in. And that just really connects me with nature and what it's all about. So I'm looking forward to that. And I do wish all of you a wonderful holiday season. In terms of what we're here to discuss for data, I'll just say I love it when we exhibit foresight as a state government. And so it's kind of crazy to me to think that 1755 passed now quite a few years ago. And with each subsequent year, the value and necessity of it just keeps getting amplified, exponentially. And so, Devin, as you said in your introductory comments, just with the more extreme weather, we're just really collecting information that is pushing kind of the boundaries of what we've seen before here in California. And we don't know exactly what's coming. We're starting to get a sense of the uncertainties and, just kind of additional work around what does it mean to have these warmer temperatures? What does it do for our hydrology? And how we share that information is so essential to work with the public, to generate trust with the public, that we don't have our head in the sand. We're clear-eyed about this uncertainty, even if it makes us uncomfortable, and that an ability to do so in an open and transparent way is just so important to provide a foundation for resource management decisions that are going to challenge all of us. So taking it like right down to like the general public, just even some of the challenges that we have in communicating about drought and communicating about water conservation, and why do I have to keep conserving if I'm sort of out and about and experiencing all these other conditions. I think really with this previous drought that we are happily now at least for the time being drought free in California, one of the real loud kind of signals was, well, we were just here and we seem to keep having to do more and more things, and to conserve water as a public person, and how does this all fit, and why do I need to be doing this? And it's a small example of a big challenge, and our ability to make sure that the information that we're collecting is available to the public so they can see it for themselves, I think is just an important expectation people should have of their government, so that they can trust them and trust that we're doing everything we can be doing to share this precious resource, to stretch it across so many needs in California. And we're doing it in accordance with our water rights system. And I'm certain Chair Esquivel will talk about that in more detail. But it's just a very exciting time to be engaged in this effort. For us as a department and entity that was responsible for getting sustainable groundwater management off the ground, there were a lot of data needs. That's just a real crystal clear example of, if you're not managing something, you tend to not even really measure it. And, just having to go from 0 to 100 in a short period of time, collecting information and then sorting out what to do with that information, and realizing that we had to start making decisions with incomplete information. And again, in that scenario, that transparency is just so critical in terms of bringing people along to say, I know it's not the complete picture, but it's enough of a picture, and we're going to have this ongoing commitment to you. As we know more, we will share more and really bring people along. And by people, I mean, just individual stakeholders, non-governmental organizations, environmental groups, EJ groups, our tribal partners, our sovereign tribal partners, as well as other government agencies. So all of that is just super essential. And then I'll just close by saying, in this particular drought, we had this moment of, sort of ongoing frustration of like this U.S. drought monitor, and it's this blob over California, and it really doesn't capture the intricacies of California water management. And so we established something called California Water Watch, which was meant to tell a more regional story, a more integrated story around groundwater supplies, surface water supplies, levels in streams, and all of that stuff. And so we did launch that to help tell the water, sort of water management story in California. It relates to a lot of other data, and we're going to have to continue to build kind of that back end. But the real trick is going to be, how do we make it useful for non-experts to understand what's important about this information? And I would say we have not figured that out yet, because at a minimum, we still rely on the federal drought monitor to tell us what we think we need to know about drought in California. So that's just I think maybe a humble point around, it's difficult to pull all this information together and then really use it to make sense of resource management decisions. But we are fully committed to that. We're excited about that. And, all the challenges that it poses pale in comparison to doing nothing. And so we're ready for those challenges. We're not going to get them all right out of the gate. And these kinds of interactions are just so important for us to hear from folks and understand what they're thinking about when they think about data management and water management and the challenges that come with it. So thank you, Devin, and thank you to my fellow panelists.
Thanks, Carla. And your comment there about the experience with the U.S. Drought Monitor and having to stand up an alternative to communicate. Let's come back to that. I think there's an important point there and topic to cover. So why don't we move to Joaquin? And Joaquin, you want to talk a little bit about your perspective from the State Board as the chair of the State Board?
Definitely. And it's great to see you, Devin. And also just honored to be here with champions amongst champions, certainly, and especially in this data space. Quick kind of gloss on a holiday memory. I started my career as an intern in Senator Boxer's office. And so I was in DC and not making much money. And so coming home for Thanksgiving and then having to do so again for Christmas simply wasn't in the financial cards for me. And what I had the fortune of having was my dear friend now, 15 years plus, but my intern coordinator at the time say, come join my family for Thanksgiving. And it really became just a yearly thing that we would do. Even this year now, we're doing Friendsgiving with folks. And it's always been an important reminder about the extended family that we all create with each other and how important community is for all of us in our work. And so definitely carry that. And thanks for the opportunity to share a bit there. So this time I have the honor of being the chair of the State Water Board here. And the State Water Resources Control Board 50 years ago brought together pollution control boards that were created in the 1940s and a water rights office. And what they began to do was create basin plans. And so this issue of how data supports our decision making, or importantly, the role of data and information as just the fundamental building blocks to anything that we do as a government or as an entity that was being created then out of the unison of two agencies, certainly, but we hadn't quantified all of our water bodies. Like what is actually out there? What are the lakes, streams, rivers, bays, estuaries? What's the groundwater resources we have? So we embarked, if you think back 50 years ago, with DWR and all of these early state agencies on this quest to begin to quantify, to understand, to build and to react to what was the climate then and what were the issues at hand then, which it's easy to remember or forget here how 50 years ago, we had a lot more water quality challenges. We had open sewage. We had, the fishable, swimmableness of our rivers was not that. And here still, we're still on a journey and really reconciling what is a lot of, collective legacy challenges, especially on the pollution side that we inherited. And the way that we've gone about actually having progress there is data, is information, is then, taking the identification of those water bodies and then saying, what are the beneficial uses? And then enumerating those. And if you look at the regulatory plans and work that now our modern agencies are all working off of, it's all from the growth and the basis of this data work. But what's obvious is we're not doing enough. And AB 1755 really did help catalyze us here in the state to say, that's great that each agency is kind of in their own journey and different missions and perhaps different focuses, but how do we all collectively better support that fundamental thing that is data and decision making, and what is it? And it's helped us actually here focus in a way that I'm just fortunate again to be one person amongst a lot of work that is here really about the collective ability to not have that data for our purposes, but open it up and use it for community purposes. And I think that that's where some of our greatest, successes around data at the State Board have been things around our drinking water needs assessment. We developed, a dozen plus metrics on the 30,000, 7,000 if you can include small state small systems, but 3,000 community water systems within the state. and said, what is the status of those systems? What's the technical, managerial, financial capacity? What's the, what are the water quality challenges they face? Are they failing or not? What are the categories for that failure? Work that we hadn't yet really done in that comprehensive way. And what's led to is the ability to bring 200 systems back into compliance in 3 years, to be able to get double the amount of construction dollars, 800 million nearly here now, and importantly, consolidate 120 systems. And so that's, even the process of consolidation on the drinking water side, that's all they're supported by data. So, I think that what we have is a lot of great momentum, because what AB 1755 really did, and the work that DWR here led and the state board was part of, was identify, well, how are we going to implement this, lofty goal to really better integrate our data? And to your point, and to kind of preview some of our discussion, I know, some of the fundamental tensions is around ownership, and whose data is it and where does it stored? And so the focus of the state has really been on interoperability of that data. How do you allow that data to speak across and get away from this, kind of tension of who owns and who gets to be the ultimate arbiter, one database to rule them all sort of mentality, and say, no, you can have interoperability across that. And that is what creates the ability to better synthesize quickly, the better to be greater decision makers in our space. Because that's, again, what all this is really about, is how do we leverage this 21st century space that we're in to be better decision makers and essentially take advantage of things that the financial sector, the energy sector, transportation, others have, the private sector are using to great effect, and including things like machine learning and AI, which is like a step way beyond where we are actually at. But it's those fundamental building blocks of opening up our data, making sure that it's fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, but importantly, also bring care principles to it, which is really this next turn of how we're viewing open data and data work. Which, yes, you want those fair principles. That's what gets us to being able to better communicate and see the same world. But you also have care principles, which are about the collective benefit, about the authority to control, about the responsibility and the ethics that come with data management, open data, and importantly, supporting something so critical as the decision makers of all of us here collectively in our roles. So it's the value is to the umpteenth, if you will, for me and the agency, and I know the state, and it's enshrined, as Director Nema said here, in the fact that we have the AB 1755 to begin with, and continued focus on data, as we've continued to know that that's how we're going to be able to at least give ourselves the best chance to be able to come to better conclusions, be able to move on what is a quickly changing system beneath us.
Wow, that's great. And I think you all have demonstrated how you're champions in your opening comments here. You're creating great value propositions, and it's nice to see that you're in somewhat agreement, but different perspectives. The thing is, it's hard. It's not easy to make this happen. And if you know anything about the water industry in California, it's an industry that used to be a stealth industry, right? Carla, your comments about putting information out there, the concern is, some people would say, once you put it out there, people can tell their own stories with it. You lose that authorship, if you will, and there's a risk there. There's also a risk that if you open it up so research institutions, people that are interested, they can access it super cleanly, easily without interacting with you, then they might do a deep dive on your operations. And the next thing you know, they're suggesting, hey, I think you might be able to operate in a way that's different, that reduces greenhouse gas emissions differently, or has less of an impact on ecology. So we have to be open to that. In some ways, those are risks that we face by participating in this. And I wonder if, perhaps in the same order, if we could start with Laurel, if you can reflect on what you see. You've stated the value, but what you see is some of the risks associated with moving further down this path.
Yeah, and I'll just nod to Joaquin with his comments on FAIR and CARE principles. CARE principles were developed by and large by sovereign tribal communities who have very real concerns about the data that they've collected that contains sensitive information about where culturally valuable sites are. And just recognizing that these are sovereign entities, they do have ownership over those data sets and might have various reasons for not wanting that data to get into the public domain. And so I just want to really forefront that we really need to have a strong focus on ethics of open data and data management. I feel like the technology behind the field has progressed very rapidly, and the ethics of data science have lagged behind, but are starting to come to the forefront more and more. And so that's something that agencies need to be very deliberate about. And I'm really encouraged that there is recognition and a push towards adopting not just the FAIR principles, but the CARE principles in the state of California. Some other concerns or risks are that as we get data into the public domain, data collected by different agencies will have been collected using different conventions. And those agencies tend to have very different standards for the format of the data, for the quality assurance and quality control procedures that they implemented for those data sets. And those data sets could end up having very different quality. So for investigators who don't know about this, or in cases where the metadata are not as well documented, investigators that are combining these different data sets can arrive at misleading conclusions without taking those differences into account. And so, one way around that is to encourage strong standards for metadata, to encourage reporting of the quality assurance and quality control measures that are being taken, and then maybe some sort of assessment about the extent to which these best practices are upheld within the individual data sets. A few additional concerns that come to mind, or risks, are right now, one of the things we're struggling with across state agencies is that different agencies also have different repositories that they use to store data. And there are pointers to those repositories in water.data, I'm sorry, the two data repositories that, that California uses. But when data are stored in multiple repositories, they're not always updated in the same way in those different places. And so there can be discrepancies in just updating of those data sets. And so again, this is something that a commonly shared set of best practices can address. And data federation can also address. Federation is the idea that it's fine to have data stored in different places and in different repositories, but we need a centralized way to search that data and be able to go to those sources. And then finally, another risk is something that was brought up earlier, but agencies have traditionally had liability concerns associated with making data widely available. I think there's more recognition now that actually making these products available and being transparent about their limitations and how they're being used is something that can help agencies avoid liability. But that is a historic concern and may still in some areas be perceived as a risk.
Thank you, Laurel. Carla, what about you?
Yeah, I think Laurel's hit on a lot of it. I would add to that a couple of things. One, DWR, of course, has a lot of significant infrastructure, as do, lots of local water districts. And so, after 9/11, there was a real big push to redact a lot of information for security reasons. And I think, that's obviously, that's a whole other sort of kettle to fish, so to speak. But the ways in which we protect our water infrastructure and protect data that could be misused for those kinds of purposes, I think is, something that is very much on our mind. Of course, for the department and our ability to mitigate those challenges, it comes down to how we approach, other kinds of infrastructure security topics. So that's just kind of, I think, a sort of slightly different take on some of the things that would traditionally be a little bit more in DWR's wheelhouse. That said, I also think, to me, I worry less in terms of risk of people looking at this data and, coming up with challenging conclusions and presenting them to the department, because I think we can handle that. And I think it's a really good sort of prod for us to think about, well, why are we doing it this way? And is there a different kind of optimization? And that's good. That's the good thing that sort of sunshine and transparency bring to public agencies. But I do think, and Laurel touched on it, it's just so fundamental to it is, real consistency around methodologies and how data is collected. And there's a real discipline there. And when we have so many different data sources coming from different places, again, this openness and transparency, I think, helps elevate all of it so that we have, a consistent collection and reflection of that data, as step one, sort of, let alone when we get to the synthesis and what does it mean, and what does it mean relative to risk management, and which part of society bears that risk? Is there a disproportionate risk borne by, disadvantaged or lower income communities, or, people of color? It just gives us a lot of, sort of opportunities. But fundamental to that is real consistency around collection, so that we can all get on, I would say, sort of more of a level playing field on exactly what that data means. And so while there are these risks, there are ways to mitigate them. The department does enter into kind of user agreements. That's a way that we kind of promote, what is appropriate use of this information, and those sorts of things. But, by and large, those are problems that are worth having, because the benefit is so great.
Thanks, Carla. Joaquin, what about you?
Yeah, I completely agree with both Director Namath and Dr. Larson's points here. And would add, I am very much an evangelist, a data evangelist here, an open data evangelist, but you have to be intentional. And I think that's what, this is really about, is making sure that we are intentional, even in, evangelizing the benefits of the decision-making space that we're trying to help support here. And I think, to Director Namath's points, the security risks are definitely one. You look at the ransomware challenges that we've seen on a number of drinking water and wastewater systems. Back east, some cases where folks were trying to start to mess with systems that would harm public health. I think that all that means, but knowing the reality of those 3,000 community water systems, even in the state of California, they don't have the staff for cybersecurity. They're not, part of this whole challenge is that, the disparate infrastructure, but even just the resources for smaller systems to be better engaging with, say, state agencies on data are pretty slim. They're busy with a lot of other things as well. But I think that this can certainly help, even maybe raise those boats where we are, as a basis, as a community, better providing these tools that, come with better security, are better, have a community around them of, fixing bugs and doing things, as opposed to, individual proprietary companies that largely dominate the space. So I think that, in addition, though, to being intentional, and those risks are just that cost, that, data doesn't come at no cost. It is usually staff time, time to curate, to Dr. Larson's point, to, QA, QC, make sure it's usable to begin with. And being submitted in a way that makes us be able to make decisions from it. And I think that then dovetails around just the risks we have right now around usability generally, and the need to definitely develop some standards and to do better at doing that, so that everyone is kind of, as needed, talking that same language, and when not, again, intentionally knowing that and understanding what we can do. And I think there's been some great progress in starting some of that discussion. And I think, again, the other risk is the reality of the need to be careful around transparency, and that in some cases, having fully open data is then not having any data, as opposed to in cases where, I think of, our irrigated lands regulatory program, where I know some regions have anonymized data on, nitrates and application, and it's like a township level, and it's, at a level enough that we definitely are in the middle of reviewing some of that data and actually have an ag expert panel to start to do so. But I think that it speaks to then the reality of that we need to approach it in a way that allows us to actually be moving forward in places where there may be a lot of aversion, due to, security, to risks that folks see, or otherwise to even providing data to begin with.
Thanks, Joaquin. And I want to ask just a really quick follow-up of the three of you. There's this idea, you touched on it in your opening comments, Joaquin, this idea that, in the business world, people refer to it as knowledge as power, and it's starting to evolve into data as power. And I think of things like self-driving vehicles now. There are companies, their intent is to develop a data set to get really good at that, but not to share it because it becomes proprietary and they're able to profit off it. Obviously, we're working in a public space. This idea of like knowledge or data is power. Do you think it has any inhibiting effect in terms of us being able to make progress in this space? I'm open to all three of you if you have a response or a thought in that regard.
I'll say that I think there's just a fundamental tension there, right? You may have companies that want to provide products that maybe the state is looking to provide as well, or could better provide at just lower cost free option that then kind of intrudes on someone's then, profit from something. But what I'd like to think is all of this work is just meaning that whatever that value add is that the private sector is bringing is floating up into a space that, we're not just reproducing code for stale, templates and basic governance sort of software. Sometimes I feel that, we could, I don't know. We're not in the business right now in all of this work of actually making software. It is about the information, but there is a fundamental tension, and it bleeds up into, I think, some of that space sometimes around really, what are the products and information flow and work that, the state provides as a basis for decision making out there versus what that value add from the private market is.
I think maybe one way to summarize that is data, open data can shift power. It can shift the balance of power. And we can do that in ways that helps the state achieve its equity goals. So one of the projects that I've been involved in brings the academic sector into partnership with state agencies and with a wide range of communities. And the objective of that project is to use some of the state's water planning models to generate future projections of water allocations under different climates and different operational schemes. And this is something that we really hope will democratize water planning in California and give these diverse communities information that they can use to either develop stronger regional adaptation plans or to really advocate for their interests within the public sector.
Thanks, Laurel. So I'm gonna, we've got about 10 minutes left, and I'm gonna combine a couple questions together for you, and maybe we'll go in reverse order this time. So Joaquin and then Carla and then Laurel. Can you, if you think about like where we are as a spectrum from, on one side of the spectrum being super siloed data housed within agencies that isn't really being shared and it's difficult to access, to this kind of data utopia concept where it's super open, there's no duplication, and everybody can get at it. Kind of where do you think we are now? Where is your agency? And maybe also a little reflection on how the consortium, through the consortium's efforts, could help further us down this path. So let's start with you, Joaquin.
I appreciate that. I think I'll be candid, and we're still a few steps down the path, but we're gaining momentum around it for sure. And I say that because, that utopia, if you will, is, and even not a utopia, just getting really to a place where there's systems talking to systems. So not a lot of staff time, here, I know California has a memorandum of understanding with the nation of Denmark, and a number of us have been to Copenhagen here and there. I know there was a recent trip from representatives from Department of Water Resources and others, and there, they have a very automated system when it comes to their regulatory work and compliance. It is systems at the wastewater treatment plants that have, as we know, very advanced SCADA systems that are monitoring and testing and ensuring that treatment is going on, or in drinking water treatment plants on the drinking water side, doing much of that same. But instead of humans having to go in and take data from those systems and then coming over here and manually then entering them into then our form on a website, it is systems talking over to systems, and it is seamless, and it's not taking a long time, and everyone's just getting back to the business of actually making good decisions. And we're not very close there yet. But I think that we can start to accelerate into it because we have these first steps and we have a lot of goodwill. But I think we still don't have standards. We still don't have, the real intentional work that'll get us there. But I'm confident that we can continue to, and I know that Water Data Consortium is a critical part of that. I appreciate just the amount of work and I know discussion in the working groups that go on. We have an AB 1755 implementation team. Shout out to Chris McCready and Greg Gearhart. There are passionate leaders there doing a lot of great work, and I think that we're wanting to get there. And it's just going to take a bit more because we are, I think of all those 3,000 community water systems, right? Or the hundreds of wastewater treatment plants as well. And we're needing to start to bridge over what have been a lot of good investment there that's contributing to decision making over onto, for my interest here on the regulatory side, where we have a lot of reporting that's going on. We always, we're just, there's a lot of flow from permits, of data, from permits to policies and everything in between that's coming through. And I'll just give a shout out to our performance report. A decade ago, the board was turned into a kind of a fee-based organization. And so we had to then really explain, well, what is our staff time going to, so that we could actually just charge the fees to the various regulated entities that we were overlooking: wastewater treatment plants, agriculture, et cetera, water right holders. And so we got into a culture of having a lot of data internally, even of like what's going on. And it's really, to your point, Devin, the questions always come out like, what are you doing? What's going on? You always have, different ways that you're just trying to explain what you do. And I think that, that at least, provided a lot of great groundwork for us in that space. But ultimately, it really is taking that step, and it's really then communicating with those systems that regulated entities are using. But back to sort of the number of systems that are out there, the different flavors that they're all in, the different contractors that work with all those different systems. Standard setting is really that next step. I think that's where we're at. We've been doing good about getting our data sets out. They're at the data.ca.gov portal. Everyone can go there. They can see all of our various agencies. We need to keep doing that, get the data out. But let's take that next step. What are the systems doing in speaking with each other? I think that's where we could go.
Thanks, Joaquin. What about you, Carla?
So, yeah, I think that is the kind of the primary state of play is, so there are, open data sources, and then there are some that are still really agency based, and how we get them to talk to each other, I think, is just going to be really critical. And that is the really critical next step. And that involves standard setting, and we need to accelerate that, no doubt. I also think that, again, sort of a slightly different angle on all of this is, one, here in California, as compared to other places, certainly other countries, but here in California, we manage our water at a very, very local level. And we really, sort of guard our privacy and the way in which we use water. And that's all done for very important reasons. But I think that sometimes some of the angst around, data and the proprietary, elements of that, which again, still important in certain circumstances. But I think as we're into this era where there's just, we have to do more with less over time, given the expression of temperature, which is separate from precipitation. The expression of temperature is going to constrain our water resources. And it does us no good economically to pretend that's not happening and that's not real. And I think when I think of, the challenges, particularly in the Central Valley with groundwater management and the sort of the economic instability that is generating around land prices, that will be stabilized by the implementation of groundwater management. That actually having that information is going to help economically to enable better decisions. And I think sometimes, we associate it with, well, if we want data, it's because we need to stop things and we need to infringe on things. I think that is just this fundamental, sort of bugaboo. And I understand where that comes from. And there's a lot in history that demonstrates that that's not an unfounded fear. However, we really are in a kind of in a new era where we have to think about that data as being something that enables us to progress. And we can progress in a way that does better for the environment and does better for more people, but that also just, represents progress across the board. And, one of the things that I make an intentional point of saying when I'm talking to water users is the Department of Water Resources very much supports the modernization of water rights, because we have to have more information to make the next generation of investments in water infrastructure. And we want that. And we can't do it without it. And there isn't a value to hoarding that information. Actually, that those projects are better served by better data, better transparency around that data. And so we're not there yet, but I think our ability to work through some of these challenges, I think, relies on continuing to craft a vision about the importance of it, and the importance of it helping us respond to challenges that we're all experiencing in California and the challenges that are going to get more intense.
Thank you, Carla. And thanks for really focusing in on the opportunity that's before us there in your comments. And Dr. Larson, I'm going to hand it to you. You have the last word on this.
I'll keep my comments really brief. I think my other two panelists here did a really good job in kind of positioning where we are on this spectrum. I'd say that compared to other states, California is really progressive here. We're at the forefront, and we have a great opportunity to really create a path that other states can emulate. In terms of where that advanced or that fully open end of the spectrum lies, I think I would just put it out there that maybe one of the things we want to work towards is developing like a digital twin of California's water resource system. So this would be a computational equivalent of California's water allocation system, and maybe it would incorporate some of the ecological benefits as well. It would be informed by real-time monitoring data, but something like that would allow us to test interventions that might be needed to be deployed rapidly. If, say, there are levee breaches during a flood within the Delta, where should we mobilize our resources to intervene to prevent an even greater catastrophe? So that might be an endpoint to work towards. I really want to focus my remaining minute or so on like what the consortium can do to help state agencies continue to improve accessibility. And I see several needs here that are common across agencies. So a boundary organization like the Water Data Consortium could really contribute here. And one of those areas is in training on open data best practices. I think that they could serve as a very useful liaison. They can lead some of these conversations that Joaquin was calling for on establishment of common standards. But another way in which they could be a liaison is to these diverse community groups who might benefit from the use of the data. And I think the Delta Stewardship Council has piloted something interesting here in our Science for Communities workshop, which was a workshop that we held last year in order to pair communities with needs for science with scientists, including scientists from the State Board and DWR, who might volunteer their time to work with those communities to identify appropriate data sets and analysis techniques. So the Water Data Consortium might consider also being a leader in data for communities. I think they may consider providing technical support, so scientific computing staff that can help implement QA/QC procedures and work with data collectors to get their data into the system in accordance with best practices. And then finally, I think they could be really valuable as a legislative liaison. Oftentimes, individual agencies don't necessarily have the political capital to lobby to the legislature, but maybe one path forward would be future amendments of AB 1755 or future bills that would really promote this integration and synthesis and the use of open models in order to answer some of these big questions that require integration across different data sources. And so I think I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you, Dr. Larson, and those are great recommendations. I know Tara and her team are taking notes, and that's exactly the kind of feedback that we need. I just want to thank each of you for taking your time, spending your lunchtime with us today. We're at about our hour, but it's been great to hear from you and appreciate your leadership in this space. You all have articulated the importance of why making progress here is critical for the state of California, but also just appreciate your time coming up on the holidays here. It's great to see you. And with that, Tara, I'm going to turn it back over to you to close things out for today. Take care, everybody.
Well, thank you all. What an incredible discussion. Thank you to Devin and all of our panelists. And really love this quote of like, we're in a new area where data really enables us to progress together. And so thank you for that. I also want to acknowledge that we've received some fantastic questions from some of our audience. While we weren't able to answer them here today, we collected them in part to help guide our future Data for Lunch series. And so we'll really be taking those into consideration as we think about events for our 2024 Data for Lunch series. Thank you all for being here. Please, if you're not subscribed to our listserv, please do so. It's where you'll find out about when the recording from today's event is available on our website, as well as other updates from the consortium. And then please join us on December 13th. We have a Data for Lunch with Delta Watermaster Jay Ziegler on lessons learned in the application of OpenET for water data reporting. So thank you to all of you for being here today, for a great discussion, and for all of you who joined us in the panel today. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.